The USS Enterprise D glided through a tranquil sector of space on a routine charting mission. On the bridge, Lieutenant Commander Data sat at ops, fingers flying over his console with inhuman precision as he catalogued faint stellar phenomena. It was the kind of quiet, methodical exploration Starfleet excelled at, patiently seeking knowledge in an unremarkable corner of the quadrant. Captain Jean-Luc Picard surveyed the starfield on the main view screen, one leg crossed over the other, appreciating the calm of a routine day. Beside him, Counselor Deanna Troy sensed the crew's contentment, a gentle background hum of curiosity and calm focus. Lieutenant Worf stood at tactical, ever vigilant even on a quiet watch, his posture stiff with discipline. In the pit between them, the low murmur of Dr. Beverly Crusher and a science officer discussing some minor spatial anomaly drifted from the science station. Everything was ordinary and peaceful aboard the Federation flagship. Then, without warning, the universe tore itself open. Captain, Worf's deep baritone cut through the quiet. The view screen flared alive with blinding white light. Picard's head snapped up as the tranquil starfield erupted into chaos. Directly ahead, space itself fractured, splintering with jagged shards of brilliance. Where there had been nothing but vacuum, a violent swirl of energy now churned. It wasn't the gentle blue shimmer of a standard wormhole or the graceful distortion of a warp field. It was something far more raw and wrong. Reality twisted, splitting along seams that shouldn't exist, as if some cosmic fabric were being torn by invisible hands. Data's hands danced on his console. Massive subspace distortion directly ahead, he reported, golden eyes widening slightly, reading energy signatures that do not correspond to any known phenomenon. Captain, the Enterprise shuddered as waves of radiation washed over the ship's shields. On screen, the rift crackled and spat arcs of multicolored light. Worf's jaw tightened. Shields holding, he growled. But we're experiencing significant subspace turbulence. Picard rose from his command chair, heart pounding in his chest, though his voice remained steady. On screen, maximum magnification. The viewer zoomed in on the spatial tier. Through the blinding glow and swirling chaos, a small dark shape became visible at the center of the maelstrom. Data leaned forward, incredulous. Captain, I'm detecting an object. No, a life form, emerging from the rift. The bridge crew watched in disbelief as a figure tumbled out of the fissure in space. Not a ship or escape pod, but a person suspended in open vacuum where no humanoid ought to survive. The figure was tiny, child-sized, and as the glare attenuated, they could make out absurdly bright colors on its form. Hues of blue, purple, and bright magenta flashed against the cosmic backdrop. For an instant, the small being hung in space, eerily motionless amid the storm of energies. Then, as suddenly as it had opened, the rift began to collapse on itself. With a final thunderous crack of subspace thunder, the fissure slammed shut, leaving silent darkness, and the childlike figure adrift, floating approximately 300 kilometers off the Enterprise's bow. Report, Picard ordered crisply, fighting the surge of astonishment roiling in his mind. A living being, a child by the looks, cast into space from a ripping hole in subspace. He forced himself to focus. Life signs, Mr. Data. Data's fingers flew over the sensor controls. Even the unflappable android sounded baffled. Confirmed life signs, sir. Humanoid in appearance. But he tilted his head, as if questioning his own readings. The patterns are highly unusual. Body temperature, heart rate, all far higher than a human child's baseline. Yet the subject is alive and apparently stable despite the vacuum. No EV suit or protection of any kind. Data glanced back at Picard, brow furrowed in wonder. This being is generating a personal energy field sufficient to repel the harsh environment of space. Captain, these readings, they're off the scale. I'm detecting power levels from that small figure equivalent to He paused, double-checking the console. Equivalent to the output of a high-yield reactor, at least, and rising. Across the bridge, stunned expressions met Data's analysis. Dr. Crusher had instinctively moved closer to the view screen, her medical tricorder in hand, even though her patient was still kilometers away. Worf's grip tightened on the tactical rail, every instinct telling him this was impossible and possibly dangerous. Counselor Troy pressed a hand to her temple, eyes closed in concentration as she extended her empathic senses outward toward the mysterious child. An instant later, her dark eyes flew open in shock. She took an involuntary step back, as if she had looked into an abyss. "Captain," Troy said softly, her voice strained. "I sensed something. It's faint from this distance, but," she struggled to find words. "There's life in that child, a vibrant, innocent presence, yet behind it, something vast. I've never encountered a mind like this. It's like looking at an ocean hidden inside a teardrop." She met Picard's gaze, concern evident on her face. "I can't get a clear read. It's as if his consciousness is both childlike and immeasurably infinite." Picard nodded solemnly. Whatever this being was, it was beyond their experience. "Mr. Worf, go to yellow alert. Shields at maximum, but do not arm weapons," he ordered. There was no hostility from the child so far, and he would not have their first action appear aggressive. "Data, is the life form conscious?" Data refined the sensor scan, then gave a slight shake of his head. "It appears to be unconscious or at least unresponsive. Vital signs are steady, though extremely elevated compared to most humanoids. No signs of injury that I can detect." "Good," Picard replied. In the midst of the adrenaline surging through him, the seasoned captain in him took over. Training and compassion. "We can't leave a child out there in vacuum, whatever it may be." He tapped his comm badge. "Picard to Chief O'Brien. Lock onto the life form of our bow and beam it directly to sickbay. Medical emergency." A crackle came through the comm. Chief O'Brien sounded flustered down in Transporter Room 3. "Captain, I'm trying, but the life form signal, it's strange. The pattern is not locking on. It's fluctuating wildly." In sickbay, Beverly Crusher was already prepping her bio-bed and medical scanners. O'Brien's voice continued, tense and apologetic. "I've never seen readings like this. It's like trying to lock onto a power surge itself. The target is, well, it's off the charts." Picard paced a step closer to Worf's station, eyes fixed on the tiny body drifting on the screen. The child's bright clothing fluttered slightly as particles of light danced around him, like a corona of energy. "Keep trying, Chief," Picard said calmly. "Recalibrate the confinement beam if you have to. This child is alive, and we're not leaving him out there." "Aye, Sir," O'Brien acknowledged. Through skill and sheer determination, the transporter chief manually adjusted pattern buffers and phase coils, coaxing the annular confinement beam to stabilize. Seconds stretched into a full minute. Then, energizing, O'Brien announced. On the main viewer, the image of the small figure began to dissolve in a sparkling haze as the transporter took hold. In sickbay, Dr. Crusher looked up just in time to see a swirl of shimmering blue energy coalesce on her primary biobed. With a final high-pitched whine, the transporter beam released its cargo. A childlike figure now lay on the biobed. Beverly stepped forward, tricorder extended, then stopped, momentarily startled by the being's appearance. The boy, or so he seemed, was diminutive, perhaps no more than half Picard's height if standing. He wore a flowing tunic-like garment of vibrant magenta and orange over a black undersuit with white boots. Attire unlike any Federation world's fashion. His skin was a light sky blue tone, and his head was large, almost spherical, with two thick purple oval markings on each cheek. The child's expression was peaceful and blank, as though in deep sleep. He had no hair. In fact, aside from those purple markings and large, calm eyes currently closed, his face was eerily serene and simple, like a doll's or a figurine brought to life. Dr. Crusher's medical tricorder shrieked with alarms the instant she held it over the boy's body. Readouts flickered nonsense, vital signs registering far beyond known limits. Before the device's biosensors saturated. "What on earth?" Beverly murmured, adjusting the tricorder and scanning again. The readings refused to settle into anything comprehensible. She tapped her comm badge. "Crusher to bridge. I have the child here in sickbay, and you're not going to believe this, but he's alive, more than alive." On the bridge, Picard exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. A ripple of cautious relief passed among the crew. They had snatched the boy from the void in time. But Beverly's tone promised something extraordinary. "Go ahead, Doctor," Picard said, stepping closer to the communications console so he could hear clearly. "In sickbay, Doctor." Crusher stared at the biobed's monitors as she spoke. "His vital signs are stronger than any humanoid I've ever encountered. Heart rate, blood pressure, neural activity, all at levels that should be impossible. Certainly for a small child. And Captain, I'm reading an energy field around him. It's faint now, but it's as if his body itself radiates power." She glanced again at her tricorder, shaking her head in disbelief. "Frankly, by all medical logic, he shouldn't even exist. I have nothing to compare these readings to. The closest I can come is, well, imagine a living reactor core the size of a child." Beverly's voice was equal parts amazement and concern, and yet his physiology appears stable. It's as though he's made of energy, in some manner I can't fathom. On the bridge, Worf and Picard exchanged uneasy looks. Data's hands paused over his console as he listened. Troy folded her arms tightly, chewing her lip. Picard's face remained composed, but his eyes were grave. "Understood, Doctor. Is the child injured or in distress?" "He appears unharmed," Crusher replied. "He's still unconscious. I'm going to attempt to wake him, but carefully. I'll administer a mild stimulant and continue monitoring. It might be best if you were here when he comes to. Captain, I suspect we're dealing with a highly unusual first contact scenario." That was Beverly's understated way of saying this could be extremely delicate, even dangerous. "Agreed. On my way." He Picard out. The captain tapped his badge again, cutting the channel, and turned to his bridge officers. "Number 1, you have the bridge," he said to Commander Riker, who had been hovering nearby, watching everything with keen concern. "Data, Worf, Counselor, with me. Let's greet our visitor." A few minutes later, the doors to sickbay whooshed open, and Picard led Data, Worf, and Troy inside, at a measured pace. They found Dr. Crusher standing beside the primary biobed, her tricorder in one hand, and a hyperspray in the other. On the bed, the small blue-skinned boy still lay motionless. Even in repose, he radiated a quiet, almost serene presence. An overhead medical scanner was bathing him in soft light, and the monitors showed fluttering lines that refused to settle into normal patterns. As the captain and the others gathered around, Beverly nodded to them and reported in a hushed voice, "He's starting to stir. I haven't given the stimulant yet. He may be coming around on his own." Picard stepped forward to the bedside, keeping his hands visible and posture non-threatening. Worf loomed just a step behind, arms at his sides, but tense as a coiled spring, ready to act if needed. Troy stood near the foot of the bed, her gaze fixed on the childlike being's face, trying to project a sense of calm reassurance empathically. Data observed intently, silent, absorbing every detail with android precision. The way the strange boy's multicolored attire seemed completely untouched by the trauma of space. The faint aura of energy that even Data felt as a subtle buzz in his positronic net. The paradox of a youthful face that might conceal immeasurable power. The boy's eyes fluttered, a pair of large, oval eyes, irises a curious shade of purple, blinked open. He sat up abruptly, in a single motion that was startlingly quick. Worf actually took a half step back, surprised by the sudden movement. Picard held his ground, offering a gentle smile. The childlike figure looked around at the unfamiliar surroundings of sickbay. He showed no sign of fear, only curiosity. His eyes moved from Beverly's blue medical uniform to Data's gold Starfleet operations color, to Worf's towering Klingon frame in security red, and finally to Picard's calm, authoritative stance. The boy tilted his head, as if processing what he was seeing. Then he broke into a bright, innocent smile. "Hi," he chirped, hopping down from the bio bed in a single little bounce. The adults around him stiffened. Worf actually reached out as if to stop the child from jumping off. But Zeno, as they would soon learn he was called, floated gently to the ground, landing on his feet. It was a subtle thing. He hadn't exactly jumped. He had almost drifted down, defying gravity for a split second. Worf caught the movement, and his eyes narrowed. That wasn't normal. Picard slowly lowered himself to one knee to be more on the child's eye level, palms open in a gesture of peace. He noted the boy's seemingly effortless landing with keen interest. Definitely not an ordinary child. "Hello there," Picard said in a warm, steady tone. "I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard. You're aboard the Starship Enterprise. We mean you no harm." The small blue boy blinked at Picard with wide eyes, and then giggled happily. "Enterprise? A starship? Wow." His voice was high and sweet, filled with delight and a kind of carefree wonder. He looked around at the pristine sickbay, the Federation technology humming softly. "This place is cool," he declared, clapping his small hands once. The gesture was simple, childlike, yet Troy felt a rippling echo emanate from him. A faint empathic impression like a pebble dropped into an endless well. The depth behind that little clap made her breath catch. She struggled to maintain her composure. Picard exchanged a quick glance with Troy, who gave a subtle nod indicating she sensed no hostility, only boundless curiosity. Encouraged, Picard continued, "You gave us quite a scare. May I ask your name?" The boy beamed at him, utterly at ease. "I'm Zeno," he announced proudly. as if expecting them to recognize it. He then added with a cheerful bounce, "Grand Zeno, actually, but you can just call me Zeno." Data's head tilted slightly at the title, Grand. Worf remained silent but on guard, his eyes flicking over the child for any sign of threat. Dr. Crusher stepped forward gently. "Hello, Zeno," she said softly, smiling in that comforting way she used with the youngest patients. "I'm Beverly. I'm a doctor here. Are you feeling all right? Any pain?" Zeno looked up at Beverly, considering the question as if it were odd. "I feel fine," he answered simply. He gave a tiny spin in place, as if showing that he was indeed perfectly okay. "See, never better." He smiled innocently, and Beverly couldn't help but smile back at the sheer positivity radiating from him. His demeanor was indeed like any child excited to be somewhere new. But beneath that she felt a twinge of uncertainty. How could a child survive what he just went through, without so much as a scratch? And those readings? Picard rose slowly from his kneel, observing Zeno closely. The boy's attention had wandered to Data now. Zeno stepped closer to the android, peering up at him. Data stood stock still, unsure how to react. "You're not a human, are you?" Zeno asked, eyes alight with fascination. He reached out and poked curiously at Data's uniform, and then lightly at Data's chest right over the Starfleet com badge. The ting sound of his small finger on the metallic badge was oddly loud in the quiet sickbay. Data blinked. "That is correct. I am an android, a synthetic life form," he replied politely. "My name is Data. Android. Data," Zeno repeated, as if tasting the words. Then he let out a delighted laugh. "Haha, you're like a person but also a thing. So cool." Data glanced at Picard, unsure how to respond to being called a thing. But Zeno's tone had been nothing but admiring. "Thank you, I think," Data said slowly. "I am a person, an android person." Troy, meanwhile, was staying attuned to Zeno's emotional state. It was truly perplexing on the surface. Zeno radiated simple joy and childlike wonder, a kind of pure innocence that warmed her heart. Yet whenever she tried to probe deeper, she sensed something immense, like standing at the edge of a vast canyon shrouded in mist. She could sense no malice or cruelty from that depth. If anything, it felt like an endless well of potential, of untapped, uncontrolled power, without any guiding emotions she could comprehend. It wasn't darkness, it was just unfathomable. Troy pressed her lips together, maintaining a gentle smile outwardly, but inside she was uneasy. How could such a limitless presence reside in this cheerful little boy? Worf cleared his throat, breaking his silence. He addressed the captain quietly, tone guarded. "Sir, might I suggest we ascertain how this child came aboard, and what his intentions are? Leave it to Worf to get straight to the security point." He did not take his eyes off Zeno, who was now circling Data in an intrigued orbit. Picard gave Worf a slight nod. Indeed, he took a step towards Zeno, who had now paused to marvel at a medical tricorder left on a nearby cart. The boy picked up the small scanning device, turning it upside down playfully, causing the device to wobble. "Zeno," Picard said calmly. The child looked up from the tricorder, which he had been shaking gently to see it light up. "We'd like to ask you a few questions, if that's all right." We want to make sure we understand how you got here, and if there's anything you need. Oh sure, Zeno responded brightly. He carefully set the tricorder down, and with a soft pop, it suddenly vanished from his hands and reappeared neatly on the cart exactly where he'd found it. An involuntary manifestation of his desire not to break the nice lady's toy. Data's eyebrows shot up at the display, and Worf's hand went instinctively to the phaser on his hip before he caught himself, oblivious to the brief alarm he'd caused. Zeno floated up onto the biobed to sit cross-legged, facing the gathered adults as if settling in for story time. "Ask me anything," he said, swinging his feet. Picard's mind raced. The tricorder's teleportation had lasted only a second, but everyone had seen it. Teleportation without a visible transporter beam, without any device at all. The captain kept his tone steady, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "Thank you," he said. "Zeno, we observed a rift, a sort of tear in space, and you came through it. Do you remember what happened? How did you get here?" Zeno put a finger to his chin, a gesture of pondering. I was playing hide and seek," he said at last. "I was it." He gave a little giggle. "And everyone always hides in the same boring places. So I thought I'd try looking somewhere new. There was this funny spot in the air, all wobbly and shiny. I just went pop through it, and then I was here." He spread his arms wide, indicating sick bays or perhaps the whole ship. The adults exchanged looks. His explanation was delivered with such artless simplicity that it took a moment to process. A wobbly and shiny spot, a spontaneously occurring subspace breach, and he just stepped through it, casually, like walking through a door. Data whispered to Picard, "Captain, the odds of a random subspace instability, forming a traversable passage are astronomical, and surviving transit without shielding." He didn't finish, but the implication was clear. It shouldn't be possible, and yet, here Zeno sat. Picard continued gently, "Do you know where that shiny spot came from? Did someone make it for you?" Zeno shrugged. "I dunno. Sometimes weird holes just show up. Maybe I made it, or maybe it was my friend playing a trick." He laughed again, swinging his legs merrily. Then he looked around at them. "It closed after I came, right? So I'm here now." He didn't seem worried about being stuck at all, just cheerfully stating a fact. Troy stepped forward slightly. "How are you feeling about that, Zeno? Are you upset that you're not where you were before?" Her voice was soothing, probing for any hidden distress. Zeno tilted his head at the empath, as if the question puzzled him. "Upset? No. This place. Interesting. New people." He gave a little bounce on the bed. "Besides, if I wanted to go, I could just go." He said it innocently, but there was an undercurrent of absolute certainty in his voice that gave everyone pause. Worf couldn't remain silent at that. "Go? Do you mean leave the ship?" he asked, trying not very successfully to keep the alarm out of his tone. "How?" Zeno looked at the burly Klingon, who fixed him with a hard stare. The boy's face scrunched slightly, as he considered whether Worf was friendly or not. Then he simply smiled as if it didn't matter. "I can go anywhere, big guy," he answered, as though explaining that water is wet, "but I like it here right now." Worf bristled at being called big guy, but Picard shot him a warning glance, and he held his tongue. Troy sensed a brief flare of something from Zeno, perhaps a hint of pride or playfulness, and again that bottomless well yawned beneath it. She thought she saw, just for a heartbeat, the purple in Zeno's eyes glint with an otherworldly depth. Then it was gone, and he was just a carefree child once more, feet kicking idly. Dr. Crusher cleared her throat softly. Zeno, you seem very healthy, which is good, but I'd like to understand a bit about your body to make sure you're completely all right after coming through that shiny spot. She gestured to the overhead scanner. This machine is just checking your health. Is it okay if I take a tiny sample? It won't hurt. She held up a small hyperspray for him to see. Zeno leaned forward, peering at the hyperspray device curiously. Okay, do what you need to, Doctor. He mimicked Beverly's formal tone with a giggle. Clearly, he found all these procedures novel and amusing. Crusher gently pressed the hyperspray to Zeno's upper arm. It hissed as it took a micro sample of tissue. Zeno didn't even flinch, just watched intently. But on the monitor, Beverly's eyes widened. The molecular scans from that tiny sample were nonsense. She saw atomic structures warping into configurations that shouldn't exist in a stable form. Then the scanner itself fuzzed out, unable to analyze further. The small sample simply evaporated into motes of light under the scanner's gaze, as if refusing to be dissected. Beverly had never seen anything like it. She forced herself to keep her expression neutral for Zeno's sake. "Thank you. That's all I need," she said kindly. Stepping back to Picard and the others, in a low whisper she added, "Jean-Luc, his cells, they didn't even register as cells, more like condensed energy that pretends to be matter. I've never imagined something like this." Picard's face remained neutral, but he absorbed her words with deepening concern. Condensed energy taking humanoid form. He thought of the Q and other godlike entities they'd encountered. But even Q at least adhered to understandable forms when in human shape. This was something new, or something beyond even Q's class of being. Before he could ponder further, the ship's intercom chirped. Commander Riker's voice sounded tense. "Bridge," to Captain Picard. Picard tapped his badge. "Picard here. Go ahead." Sir Riker reported, "We're detecting residual effects from that subspace tier. Frankly, it looks like a cascading subspace rupture. It's expanding beyond the initial location." In the background, Picard could hear the beeps of sensor consoles and the murmur of the bridge crew back at their posts. "We may have a situation." Picard exchanged quick looks with Data and Worf. The anomaly wasn't over yet. "Understood. I'm on my way." Picard out. He stepped closer to Zeno, who was watching them all with bright eyes, clearly picking up that something was happening. "Zeno, we have a problem to deal with. A big problem. You're welcome to stay here in sickbay with Dr. Crusher, or if you prefer, you can come with us to the bridge. But I must return to my duty now." He spoke carefully, treating the child with respect but also mindful that Zeno might not react well to being left alone or feeling excluded. Zeno hopped off the bio-bed at once. "I want to come. I want to see," he said eagerly. The notion of staying behind clearly did not appeal to him. His voice had a touch of insistence that brooked no argument. Troy sensed a spike of anxious energy from him at the thought of being left, and she quickly smiled and extended her hand towards Zeno in a friendly gesture. "All right," Picard nodded. "But you must promise to be careful and follow our instructions while we work, okay? We have to concentrate." Zeno nodded rapidly. "I promise. I'll be good." He reached up and surprisingly took Troy's hand when she offered it. Deanna Troy felt a child's small hand slip into hers. Warm, normal enough, yet a tingle went through her arm, as if she'd grasped a static-charged capacitor. She gave his tiny hand a gentle squeeze and led him alongside as the group moved out of sickbay. Worf took point slightly ahead, and Data and Picard flanked their unusual guest as they hurried to the nearest turbolift. Moments later, the turbolift doors swished open onto the bridge, and what had been calm minutes ago was now a hive of activity. The main view screen showed a visual distortion in space not far from the Enterprise. An ugly swirling bruise against the stars, shot through with crackling energy discharges. At the science station, Ensign Tisari from Astrophysics was animatedly briefing Riker. The first officer turned as Picard strode in. He gave a brief nod of acknowledgement to Zeno. Riker's eyes lingered a moment on the small alien child holding Troy's hand, but he trusted his captain's judgment and saved questions for later. "Captain, we have a developing crisis," Riker said without preamble. He pointed to the view screen, where the camera angle showed the churning distortion spreading slowly. Sensors show that the initial rift's collapse has destabilized subspace in this entire region. A chain reaction is underway. Data released Zeno's other hand and moved swiftly to his station. His fingers flew over the LCAR's interface. "Captain, reading multiple microfractures in subspace radiating out from the original coordinates of the tier. The phenomenon is growing exponentially." He paused, looking up, concern etched even on his android features. "If it continues unchecked, it could disrupt subspace for several hundred light years." Picard's face tightened. Disrupting subspace on that scale could mean ships unable to go to warp, entire star systems cut off, not to mention what gravimetric shearing could do to planets in the affected zone. Time frame, Mr. Data. At the current rate of expansion, Data worked the console calculating. The subspace collapse could affect inhabited systems within hours. I am reading one Federation colony, and numerous other inhabited planets near the periphery of the projected impact zone. Troy had gently guided Zeno to stand near the command chair with Picard. She released his hand. The boy was now focused on the main viewer, eyes wide at the swirling cosmic rift. To him, perhaps, it looked like a giant, colorful storm. She felt his emotions, curiosity, and a twinge of concern as he picked up on the crew's tension. Worf checked tactical sensors and added, "Captain, Starfleet Command is signaling. They've detected the subspace disturbances. They're ordering us to contain it if possible, and are dispatching support vessels. But the nearest ship is over 12 hours away at maximum warp." His tone conveyed what they all knew. 12 hours might be far too late. Picard's mind raced through possibilities. This was not a hostile foe you could negotiate with or fight. It was physics run amok on a colossal scale. "Options, suggestions. I'm open to anything," he said, looking at his bridge crew. If this were a conventional problem, he'd consider using the main deflector to emit a static warp field to stabilize subspace, perhaps a modified graviton pulse. But the scale was daunting. Data spoke up, never taking his eyes off his console. "We could attempt to seal the microfractures by emitting an inverse warp field tuned to the same frequency as the initial distortion. The main deflector could be configured to project such a field." Geordie LaForge's voice cut in over the comm, having been listening from engineering. "It's theoretically possible, Captain, but generating a field of sufficient size, we'd be trying to stitch up a subspace wound covering dozens of light years. The Enterprise's deflector might contain it locally, but not stop the overall cascade." His frustration was evident. As chief engineer, he didn't like declaring something beyond their capability. "I'll do everything I can from here. We'll start reinforcing the warp field and shoring up structural integrity in case of shock waves." "Make it so," Picard responded. "Any evacuation plans for that colony?" He glanced to Worf, who was already on it.
Worf nodded. The colony has been alerted. They have limited transport capacity, even if they evacuate non-essential personnel via their transports. They cannot relocate everyone in time. There are over 20,000 people on that planet. The unspoken truth: if subspace collapsed there, warp travel would fail, and they might be stuck as their planet was pummeled by gravimetric forces. A heavy silence fell. This was the kind of nightmare scenario Starfleet captains feared, a disaster too vast to stop, where any action they took might not be enough. Picard's jaw clenched. He would not simply stand by and watch an entire colony, or multiple worlds, be destroyed if he could help it. But what could they do beyond their limits? Zeno tugged lightly at Picard's uniform hem, drawing the captain's attention. The small Omni-King's face was strangely serious now. His earlier playfulness muted as he watched the streaks of energy on the screen. "It's broken," Zeno said quietly, pointing at the rift. "Everything feels shaky." Picard knelt by him again, maintaining calm for the child's sake, though he shared the dread. "Yes, Zeno, something in space got broken, and we're trying to fix it." He placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "But it's very large. We're not sure if we can fix it in time." The admission cost him, but honesty was important, and perhaps Zeno might have some insight, or at least not panic. Not that Zeno seemed the panicking type. Rather, Picard was faintly astonished at how composed the child was in the face of this cosmic catastrophe. Zeno looked up at Picard, blinked, then looked back at the viewer. "People will get hurt if it's not fixed?" he asked. His voice was still childlike, but there was a solemn undertone. Try watched the exchange carefully. She sensed Zeno's concern spiking at the idea of others being hurt. It was a genuine, innocent worry, like a child realizing someone might be in danger. "Yes," Tried answered softly. "Many people could get hurt, Zeno. They're very scared right now." Zeno's purple eyes narrowed ever so slightly. He nodded once, then hopped away from Picard's side and took a few steps toward the view screen, as though he could reach out and touch the rift. Worf tensed, unsure what the boy intended to do. The bridge security officers glanced nervously at their captain, awaiting a cue, but Picard held up a hand subtly. Wait. Something about Zeno's demeanor had changed. Not malevolent, but focused. Zeno stood in the middle of the bridge, staring intently at the swirling anomaly far ahead. "Too messy," he murmured, almost to himself. Then he raised his right hand. The small blue hand, with its stubby childlike fingers, extended toward the view screen, and Zeno snapped his fingers. For an infinitesimal fraction of a second, everything went utterly silent and still. The lights on the bridge dimmed, as if reality itself paused. Tried felt a jolt, a sudden void of emotion, as if all of Zeno's childlike presence vanished into an unfathomable void in that split second. Data's console flickered, momentarily overloaded by an indescribable input. Worf's heart skipped. He found he'd drawn his phaser halfway, without even thinking, spurred by raw alarm at the energy spike. Picard simply watched, eyes locked on the view screen, trusting that something extraordinary was about to happen. And then, the rift was gone. Not slowly shrinking, not collapsing violently. One moment the subspace tier spanned light years, spitting out chaos, and the next it simply ceased to exist. The stars on the main viewer snapped back into their normal positions against the black, as though the universe had been a scratched record now playing smoothly again. Sensor readings flatlined from extreme to normal in a heartbeat. The spatial tremors rocking the Enterprise stopped. The deck steadied under their feet.
All that remained was a fading aurora of colored light, twinkling briefly before dissipating into the ether. On the bridge, every jaw dropped. Data's hands flew over his console. "Captain, the subspace rupture has vanished. Completely." He was almost speechless, a rarity for the unflappable android. "All readings are returning to baseline levels. Subspace continuum is stabilizing across the affected region at an impossible rate." He turned to stare at Zeno, positronic brain, trying to grapple with what his instruments, and his very eyes, had just witnessed. Worf lowered his half-drawn phaser slowly, his mouth slightly open in astonishment. The rest of the bridge crew stood frozen, a mix of awe and confusion. On the viewer, there was no trace that a few moments ago an entire sector was on the brink of cataclysm. Zeno turned back to face them, lowering his hand. His bright smile returned as if nothing unusual had happened. "All fixed," he announced cheerfully. A long beat of stunned silence followed. Picard was the first to find his voice. He stepped toward the center of the bridge, toward Zeno. His eyes were wide despite himself. "Zeno, what did you do?" Zeno shrugged with an innocent tilt of his head. "It was broken, so I fixed it. It was easy," Data muttered, almost to himself. "Easy. A subspace rupture of multi-light-year scope, repaired in an instant." He looked around, as if to confirm with others that this was reality. "This violates everything." Dr. Crusher, who had followed them onto the bridge, quietly and witnessed the event from near the turbo lift, raised a hand to her mouth in astonishment. "My God," she breathed. He stopped it. Just like that, Troy released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She could hardly sense Zeno at that moment of the snap. It was as if his mind became the void, an infinite nothing that consumed the chaos. Now she felt the boy's glee at having helped, like a child proud of cleaning up a spilled glass of milk. But accompanying that innocence, she also felt the lingering echoes of that abyssal power. It was terrifying and awe-inspiring all at once, making her shiver. Worf's ridged brow was furrowed in an expression rarely seen on the Klingon, something approaching fear. He had faced godlike entities before, with the Enterprise crew, beings of immense power like Q. But this child, Zeno, he had just casually done something even Q would be astonished by. Worf's warrior instinct screamed that no security measures could protect the ship from this being. If things turned hostile, the Enterprise is utterly at his mercy, he realized with a sinking feeling. Picard gently placed a hand on Zeno's shoulder, drawing the boy's attention. He forced a calm smile. "Zeno, thank you. You saved a lot of people by doing that." His mind was racing. This small, cheerful being wielded the power of a god. No, far beyond any god concept. Picard knew, and yet he acted as if it were nothing. Playful and naive, yet capable of destroying entire universes with a gesture, Troy had said in the briefing. Now Picard believed it wholeheartedly. If Zeno can mend universes with a snap, he could likely shatter them just as easily. At that thought, an uneasy tension crept back into the air. The bridge crew exchanged glances, gratitude for averting disaster mixed with the dawning realization of what exactly stood among them. If Zeno had this level of power, what happened if something, or someone, angered him? The memory of Troy's words hung unspoken, liable to wipe out a universe if he gets upset. Zeno seemed oblivious to the anxiety rippling around him. He hopped from one foot to the other happily, and said, "That was fun."
"Do you have more broken stuff to fix?" He looked around the bridge as if hoping for more excitement. The officers were too flabbergasted to respond immediately. At Ops, Data's analytical mind recovered first and immediately began scanning long range to ensure no other anomalies lingered. "Captain, all scans show normal space. The crisis has truly been resolved." His tone was equal parts relief and disbelief. "It's as though the rift never occurred." Picard nodded slowly. He tapped his comm badge. "Picard to engineering. Stand down from emergency procedures. The subspace cascade has been neutralized." LaForge's voice came back, utterly confused. "Neutralized, sir. How?" Picard glanced at Zeno. "I'll explain later, Geordi." Picard out. He decided it was best to keep this as contained as possible for now. Starfleet would be asking a lot of questions soon. No doubt. How could he possibly explain? Before that thought could progress, another voice crackled over communications. The colonial administrator from the threatened planet, sounding both joyous and perplexed as they reported all readings had returned to normal, and asked what the Enterprise had done. Picard assured them the danger was over, and that he would give details soon. He cut the channel as quickly as protocol allowed. He knew he couldn't exactly say a child from another reality saved you by snapping his fingers, at least, not yet. As the immediate adrenaline of the crisis passed, an awkward quiet settled on the bridge. Zeno wandered a few steps, admiring the bridge layout, unaware or unconcerned that every crew member's eyes tracked him with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Data kept stealing glances, as if running scenarios in his head, that still came up null. Worf's hand never strayed far from his weapon, though he knew in his gut it was useless. Troy watched Zeno with compassionate eyes. She sensed no hostility still, but the very knowledge of his power had everyone on edge. Picard shared their unease. The captain in him recognized another dilemma now. How do we handle a being of unlimited power who appears as a child with a child's whims? There was no Starfleet protocol for this exact scenario. Closest maybe was the Q encounters, and with Q, Picard could at least rely on the entity's ego and logic to find a solution or detente. But Zeno was different. He wasn't here to test humanity or make mischief. He was here by accident, and he had been nothing but friendly and helpful. Yet the potential for catastrophe was ever present, like sitting beside a playful sun that could go supernova if unknowingly provoked. Worf's low voice broke the silence. "Captain," he rumbled carefully, "recommendation. We should perhaps limit our guests' access to critical systems for the safety of the ship." It was a diplomatic way to say we need to contain this threat. Zeno, meanwhile, had discovered the captain's chair. His eyes lit up at the sight of the big central seat from which Picard commanded the ship. Without hesitation, the Omni-King skipped toward it. Troy's head whipped around. "Zeno," she started, unsure if that was allowed. In a blink, Worf moved to block Zeno's path. The security chief's protective instincts finally overrode caution. He stepped in front of the chair, a broad hand held out in a halting gesture. "Stop, that chair is the captain's," Worf said firmly. It came out harsher than he intended, an order barked at a child god. Zeno stopped short, looking up, way up, at Worf's stern, towering form. The bridge fell deathly still. Troy's breath caught. Picard opened his mouth to interject, but the moment hung precariously. The small Omni-King's cheerful expression faltered for the first time. His lips pursed in a confused little frown. He clearly wasn't used to being told no or stop. A tiny crease appeared on his forehead. "I just wanted to see." he said softly. There was a quaver of hurt in that childlike voice.
Worf realized his mistake instantly. This was exactly the kind of breach in etiquette, the misunderstanding they all feared. He had addressed Zeno as he would any misbehaving crew dependent or visitor, with a brusque command, but this visitor could erase them from existence with a whim. Worf swallowed, a bead of cold sweat trickling down his temple. In his peripheral vision, he saw Picard give a subtle, urgent gesture to stand down. Worf slowly lowered his hand, heart pounding, but the damage might already be done. Zeno's eyes darkened, not with rage exactly, but with a kind of petulant displeasure. The air on the bridge grew heavy. For the first time since arriving, Zeno's innocent face took on a more alien aspect. The blankness of his expression now seemed eerily inscrutable. He tilted his head at Worf, and in that movement there was something ominous. Troy's nails bit into her palm as she felt a swell from Zeno, a spike of emotion like a storm cloud blossoming. Hurt pride, annoyance, vast and dangerous. "Why are you being mean?" Zeno asked quietly. His voice was still small, but it carried a weight that made the hairs on the back of Picard's neck stand up. The overhead lights dimmed an instant, flickering as if some power drain hit the systems. Data glanced at its console. Power levels were fluctuating wildly in the warp core for reasons he couldn't begin to analyze. The ship itself seemed to hold its breath. Every person on the bridge froze, muscles taut. Worf himself stayed rooted, though every instinct screamed to either fight or flee. Neither was possible or sensible. Very slowly, Worf bowed his head in an apologetic gesture. "I apologize," he managed in a low rumble, forcing respect into his tone. "I did not mean to upset you." Picard stepped forward swiftly, but calmly, inserting himself gently between Worf and Zeno. The captain's voice was the model of soothing conciliation. "Please forgive us, Zeno. Mr. Worf was only trying to protect my station. He didn't realize you just wanted to look. It's all right." He shot Worf a warning glance to back off further. Worf retreated one step, his face contrite but still tense. Zeno looked up at Picard. For a moment, Troy feared the child might unleash some unfathomable power. His emotional state was seesawing and inscrutable to her. But as quickly as the moment came, it passed. Zeno's frown melted back into a soft smile. The lights on the bridge brightened to normal. The odd pressure in the air vanished. "Okay," Zeno chirped, appeased by Picard's gentle explanation. He apparently accepted Worf's apology with a simple nod, as if nothing had happened. The frightening glint in his eyes vanished, back to bright childlike eagerness. He then looked again to the captain's chair, now with uncertainty. "Can I sit there maybe, just for a second?" he asked Picard as innocently as any child asking permission. Picard let out a quiet breath of relief. Crisis averted. By the barest margin, he mustered a warm smile. "Of course, Zeno, be my guest." With a courteous gesture, Picard personally escorted the small Omni-King to the center seat. Zeno climbed up into the big chair. It was clearly oversized for him. His feet dangled above the floor. He giggled, wriggling back against the cushion and touching the arm panels lightly. "Captain Zeno," he announced to no one in particular, and gave a mock-serious face, imitating Picard's authoritative pose. The bridge crew watched with a mix of astonishment and cautious amusement. It was a surreal sight, this tiny, all-powerful being, playing make-believe starship captain. Picard stood beside the chair, one hand resting on the back of it protectively, the other behind his back in his familiar stance. "It suits you," he said kindly, "but only for a little while, all right? I will need my chair back eventually." He gave Zeno a conspiratorial wink. Zeno nodded vigorously. Just wanted to try it." He swiveled the chair side to side a bit, taking in the view from the center of the bridge. Worf resumed his station, moving gingerly as if any sudden motion might upset their guest again. Data looked on, still awash in wonder. Troy let out a slow breath, steadying her nerves. She met Picard's eyes. He gave her a slight nod of acknowledgement. They had narrowly avoided a disaster of literally unthinkable proportions. After a minute of enjoying the captain's seat, Zeno hopped down and patted back over to Troy. "Here, you take it back," he said to Picard cheerfully, as if returning a borrowed toy. There was no lingering sign of his momentary displeasure. If anything, he seemed even happier now, perhaps at Worf's apology, or simply having had a bit of fun. Picard smoothly sat back down in his rightful chair, but the weight of what had just transpired settled heavily on him. He looked at Zeno, who was now standing at Troy's side and gazing out the view screen at the stars drifting by. This childlike being held their fate in his tiny hands, whether he intended to or not. One misstep, one accidental provocation, and the consequences could have been apocalyptic. And yet, what was their alternative? Treat him harshly? Attempt to confine or harm him? That was not only impossible, but morally reprehensible. Picard's only viable path was the one he always tried first: empathy, understanding, diplomacy.
But how do you reason with a child who can snuff out suns? He decided now was the moment to truly reach Zeno, to perhaps impart some measure of understanding of the situation, and to gauge how much Zeno comprehended of his own power in relation to others. This required a quieter setting, away from the tense eyes of the crew, and with less chance of interruption or another mishap. Picard stood again and straightened his uniform. "Zeno," he said in a gentle tone that caught the boy's attention, "would you join me for a little talk? Perhaps in a quieter room, just us two." He gestured toward the doors at the rear of the bridge. "Right through here, I'd like to show you something." Zeno looked curious and agreeable. "Sure," he chimed. He gave Troy's hand, which he had taken again, a friendly squeeze and let go. Troy offered Picard a reassuring half-smile as if to say good luck, and moved aside. Picard led Zeno into the observation lounge, the Enterprise's conference room, with its long table and the panoramic windows looking out onto the stars. The lights were at ambient evening setting, soft and low, and the models of previous Enterprise ships silently lined the wall, witnessing the moment. As the doors hissed closed behind them, an almost eerie calm enveloped the lounge compared to the drama on the bridge. Zeno wandered to the long wall of windows immediately, pressing his small hands to the transparent aluminum and gazing out in awe at the infinite stars beyond. The Enterprise's warped nacelles cast a gentle blue glow on part of the view. For a moment, he was just a little child marveling at the night sky, albeit from a vantage point few children ever see. "So many stars," Zeno whispered. "The cosmos was peaceful again, thanks to him." Picard walked slowly to the boy's side, standing a respectful pace away. He too looked out at the stars, allowing a comfortable silence to form. This was a familiar posture for the captain. He often came here to think, to reflect on decisions and the weight of command. Tonight, the weight felt heavier than ever. After a minute, Picard spoke softly, his voice carrying a thoughtful timbre. "It's beautiful, isn't it? All those stars." Zeno agreed quietly, face nearly pressed to the window. "Beautiful." His breath fogged the glass slightly. "You know," Picard continued, "when I was a child, a little older than you appear to be, I used to look up at the night sky from my home in France. I would see a tiny band of the Milky Way, just a fraction of the stars you can see out here, and I thought to myself how vast and full of possibilities it all was. I dreamed of exploring them one day." He smiled faintly at the memory. "Now here I am among those stars, exploring." Zeno turned to face him, still leaning against the window ledge. He listened with a curious tilt of his head. Picard realized Zeno might not fully relate to a childhood dream of exploration. After all, Zeno could likely go anywhere on a whim. Still, the boy seemed interested, so Picard went on. "Every star out there could be a sun for someone's home," Picard said gently, pointing at a bright pinprick outside. "Around that star right now there might be a planet with people living their lives, working, playing, raising families, people with dreams and hopes." He paused, ensuring Zeno was following. The child's purple eyes were large and attentive, fixed on him. "In our universe, Zeno," Picard said, choosing his words carefully, "life is precious, fragile. People can't snap their fingers and fix a broken world like you did. We have to work hard to solve our problems. And when lives are lost, we can't get them back." His voice grew softer. "That's why we were so worried about that big broken part of space, because if we failed, countless lives would have been lost." Zeno's cheerful face had faded into something more thoughtful. He hopped up to sit on the window ledge, swinging his legs a little. "I understand," he said quietly. "You were scared for them. I could feel it." He looked down as if puzzling something out. "In my home, things are different. If something bad happens to a universe, we just poof, start over. New universe, new lives. The old ones are gone, but..." He trailed off, frowning, trying to express an idea that maybe he never had to put into words. "It's just how it is. I decide if universes stay or go, and I can make new ones anytime." Picard suppressed a shudder. He's talking about entire universes as if they were playthings, but the captain kept his tone calm and empathetic. "That's an immense responsibility, Zeno. Deciding whether whole worlds, whole universes continue or end." Zeno looked up at him with a puzzled innocence. "Responsibility." Picard turned to face him fully, leaning against the window frame. In the dim light, with the glow of starlight on his features, Picard's expression was one of earnest gravity. "When you have the power to affect so many lives, the power to destroy or save, it comes with a responsibility, a duty to be careful, to make sure you understand the consequences of
What you do." He gestured gently out at the stars again. "Out there, the lives we were trying to save, they only get one life each, Zeno. If a planet is erased, those people, every individual with their own stories, their families, their loved ones, all gone forever. We can't recreate them exactly as they were. They can't be replaced." Zeno absorbed that. His feet had stopped swinging. He seemed to be concentrating intensely on Picard's words. "But if I can make a new universe, there will be new people. Isn't that the same?" he asked. Not challengingly, but genuinely trying to understand. It was perhaps the first time he'd thought about it, from the perspective of those inside the worlds he oversees. Picard shook his head slowly. "Not the same. Think of it this way. We on the Enterprise consider each other family. Dr. Crusher, Counselor Troy, Mr. Worf, Data, all of us. We've become close because of our shared experiences, our friendships. A small smile touched his lips as he spoke of his crew. If something happened to one of them, no other person, no matter how similar, could fill the exact place they hold in our hearts. Each life is unique, each connection precious. He looked straight at Zeno, voice gentle but firm with conviction. So yes, one could make new universes with new people, but those who were lost, all their individual joys, struggles and memories, would still be gone forever. That is a tragedy, Zeno, a very real sadness to those left behind. Zeno's face slowly fell. His youthful features managed to convey a kind of solemn realization. In my place, I never thought about it like that, he admitted softly. When I erase a universe, I just do it. It's usually because something very bad is happening, or they made me upset. He spoke with the blunt honesty of a child. Nobody ever told me about the people inside. I mean, I knew there were people, but he scrunched his face. Empathy. He was trying to grasp empathy, perhaps for the first time on a broad scale. Picard felt a cautious sense of hope. Zeno was listening, truly listening. You said you sometimes erase universes if they upset you, Picard prompted gently. Have you ever been upset like that often? Zeno shook his head. Not really, only a few times. One time there were too many universes, so I got rid of some extras. Another time, some very bad guys were doing horrible things in their universe. So, poof, gone. He said it with a casual air that contrasted chillingly with the content. But I wasn't angry. If I was really angry, I might erase more. He looked down at his hands, perhaps imagining that possibility. I don't like to be angry. It's scary. The thought of Zeno, this being truly enraged, sent a stab of ice through Picard. But he kept his demeanor steady. I can understand that. I don't like to be angry either, he offered, trying to relate. Anger can make us do things we regret. That's why we practice self-control. We think before we act, especially when our actions have great consequences. Zeno nodded slowly. I never really had to think about it. I just did stuff. But he looked around the observation lounge thoughtfully, as if seeing it anew. Today, I almost got angry at Mr. Worf. Picard stiffened slightly. Here it was, the crux of their fear. Yes, I saw that. Zeno slid off the window ledge and stood on the floor, small hands clasped in front of him. He looked up at Picard with an earnest expression that was heartbreakingly childlike. He thought I was bad, didn't he? Or dangerous. That made me feel yucky. I don't want friends to think I'm bad. Picard's stern face softened. In that moment, Zeno wasn't an Omni-King or a cosmic entity. He was just a child seeking acceptance. Worf doesn't think you're bad. He was just worried. It's his job to protect us. And he didn't understand you. He made a mistake in how he spoke. That's all. Zeno fidgeted. I felt really mad for a second. Like, I wanted to make him go away. Not forever, he added hastily, as if clarifying to himself. Just a little bit. But then you said it was okay, and he said sorry. So I wasn't mad anymore. He frowned, clearly uneasy with recalling even that brief surge of anger within himself. Picard felt a bead of sweat on his back. Make him go away a little bit. That could have meant who knows what. Perhaps erasing Worf from existence temporarily, or something equally alarming. But the captain kept focused. I'm very glad you calmed down, Zeno. You see,
None of us want to hurt you or be mean to you. We're only afraid because we don't understand you fully. And when people are afraid, they sometimes make mistakes, like raising their voice or trying to control things they don't need to. He took a step closer and knelt so that his eyes were level with Zeno's. But being so powerful, you have to be even more careful, because if you make a mistake, Picard didn't finish the sentence explicitly. He didn't need to. The memory of that ominous flicker of darkness on the bridge was fresh in both their minds. Zeno's eyes were moist, whether with emotion or some effect of reflection. Picard wasn't sure. "I don't want to hurt anyone here," he said quietly. "You're all so nice. I like you, Captain Picard. And the others too. You treat each other like I wish people in my place did." Picard raised an eyebrow gently. "How so?" Zeno hopped back onto a chair by the conference table, drawing his legs up. "Back home, everyone's either scared of me or super polite all the time. Like they bow and they tremble if I look upset. They call me Omni-King or Your Highness and stuff. I mean, I am the king of everything." But he gave a world-weary sigh, startlingly out of place from such a small being. "It's boring and lonely." He looked at Picard, who was listening intently. "I never get to just talk or play normal, except with one friend I made recently. Everyone else is too afraid." Picard felt a pang of sympathy. The thought of this childlike entity with absolute power but no true companionship was saddening. It was as if he were a revered sovereign who lived in a palace of endless toys but had no peers to genuinely play with. "I can imagine that would feel very lonely," Picard said softly. "Even a king needs friends." Zeno nodded. My friend. His name is Goku. He isn't scared of me. He's silly and fun. That's why I like him. I was playing hide and seek with him when I found that shiny hole and came here." He smiled at the thought of his friend, but then looked a bit guilty. "He's probably worried that I disappeared. I should go back soon." "So that's how it happened," Picard mused. "An innocent game led you to us, and you helped us greatly, Zeno. More than we can ever repay." He stood up slowly, placing a hand on the back of the chair Zeno sat in. "I'm grateful, truly." Zeno looked around the observation lounge, at the model ships, the starry vista, then back at Picard. "I liked helping," he said. "It made me feel warm inside. Everyone was happy after. That felt good." He grinned, and for a moment he was just a kid, proud of doing something right. "Is that how you feel when you help people?" Picard smiled broadly now. "Yes, it is. It's one of the best feelings in the world, knowing you made a positive difference in someone's life." Zeno hopped off the chair and stood before Picard, despite being so small next to the tall captain. At that moment, his presence filled the room in a benevolent way. "I think I learned something today," he announced, as if making a royal proclamation. Picard tilted his head. "Oh." Zeno spread his arms wide, struggling to articulate it. "I learned that little things can be important, like one person's life, one friend. It matters." He nodded firmly to himself. "I don't want to erase things just because I'm upset or bored. It might make someone sad somewhere." He looked up at Picard, eyes shining with sincerity. "You taught me that with your crew, you all care about each other so much, and all those people out there." He gestured vaguely toward the window, meaning the colony and beyond. "I never thought about caring about people. I don't even know. It's neat." He smiled, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. A tear of a complex emotion, perhaps new to him. Empathy. Picard felt his own throat tighten at the child's words. He gently reached out, and with permission in his eyes, wiped the tear from Zeno's cheek with his thumb. "You're a remarkable young man, Zeno," he said softly, "with a good heart. I think you just needed a little perspective." Zeno sniffed and then surprised Picard by suddenly stepping forward and wrapping his short arms around the captain in a hug. Picard froze for a half-second in surprise, then returned the hug gently, patting Zeno's back. The boy's embrace was warm and oddly comforting, despite the enormity of what he was. In this moment, he was just a child who needed a hug. After a moment, Zeno stepped back and rubbed his eyes, then looked about himself with newfound determination. "I should really go home now," he said. "My friend will be looking everywhere, and I left in the middle of the game. That's not fair." He gave an apologetic little bow to Picard, mimicking how he'd seen others bow to him.
"Thank you, Captain Picard. This was fun and important." He nodded, as if affirming that to himself. "You're my friend, too." The corners of Picard's mouth lifted in a gentle grin. "I'm honored to be your friend, Zeno." He straightened his uniform reflexively, the fatherly warmth giving way to duty once more. "How will you travel back? Do you need our help to reopen the rift?" Zeno shook his head with a light giggle. "Nope, I can go on my own." He then pursed his lips, thinking that maybe I shouldn't make a big boom here. It might break something again. He tapped his chin, recalling how his arrival had caused a tear. Data's voice came over the comm suddenly, sounding tentative. Data to Captain Picard. Likely the crew was anxious about what was happening in the lounge, and Data chose to gently interrupt after giving some time. Picard tapped his badge. "Picard here." "Sir, apologies for the interruption. Is everything all right?" Data asked carefully. Picard glanced down at Zeno and smiled. "Yes, Mr. Data, everything is fine. Our guest is preparing to depart." He looked at Zeno meaningfully. Zeno nodded and raised his voice slightly, speaking toward Picard's badge as if it were a microphone. "Hi everyone, thank you for having me," he chirped. On the bridge, those listening could hear him, and a few bemused smiles broke out among the crew. Data responded. "It was an interesting visit, Zeno. We wish you well." Others echoed quietly on the bridge, Crusher's kind voice adding, "Take care, Zeno." And even Worf managed a gruff, respectful farewell. Coppola, safe journey. Troy's gentle tone came last. "Goodbye, Zeno. Stay well." Zeno beamed at hearing their voices faintly through the comm. "They're nice," he told Picard. Then, planting his feet, Zeno concentrated. He held out both hands, and in them an orb of light, golden and warm, blossomed into being. It expanded quickly, enveloping him in a shining globe that shimmered with all the colors of creation. Picard stepped back, raising an arm to shield his eyes from the brilliance. The observation lounge was filled with a gust of what felt like a summer wind, and a high chiming sound rang out, as though a million tiny bells harmonized for an instant. Through the light, Picard caught a final glimpse of Zeno. The boy waved at him, smiling radiantly. Picard managed to wave in return, heart full. Then, with a sound like a gentle pop, the light imploded to a point, and Zeno was gone. The shimmering point winked out, leaving only the quiet hum of the Enterprise engines in its wake. Picard stood alone in the now dimmer observation lounge, staring for a long moment at the spot where the Omni-King had stood. The room felt markedly emptier, as if an impossibly massive presence had just left, and only now could the space exhale. He let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding, composed himself,
and then turned and walked back onto the bridge. Every pair of eyes turned to the captain in anticipation. Picard walked to the center of the bridge, slowly. Troy stood from the counselor's seat, searching his face. Worf looked expectant. Data's head twitched slightly, processing a dozen questions. Riker stepped forward. "Sir, Zeno." Picard gave a slight, reassuring smile. "Zeno has returned home," he answered. He eased down into his command chair, feeling the real fatigue of the day settle in now that the cosmic visitor was gone. It appears his visit to our universe has concluded. The bridge was quiet for a moment, as everyone absorbed that. Worf was the one to break the silence, almost sighing the words, "That is good." His shoulders relaxed visibly. "With respect, Captain, I hope we never encounter him, or anyone like him, again." It was half a quip, half a genuine prayer, from the warrior who had been pushed to the limits of his courage. Dr. Crusher had tears in her eyes, only now processing the magnitude of what they'd all been through. "I still can't quite fathom it. A child who could end us all in a heartbeat. And yet he was so sweet," she said softly, bewildered by the duality. Data looked up from his console, adding in a tone of wonder, "In all my computations, I could not have predicted an event like this. It defies probability and knowledge, yet it happened. Truly fascinating." He managed a small smile toward Picard. "And, might I add, an impressive demonstration of diplomacy, sir." Picard inclined his head graciously at Data's compliment, but his expression was distant, reflective. Troy gently prompted, "Captain, are you all right?" She could sense a swirl of complicated emotions within him. Relief, astonishment, worry, hope. Picard took a moment, then nodded. "I am just thinking." He gazed at the main viewer, where stars now drifted serenely. The crisis averted, the Omni-King gone. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt quite the same. "Counselor, what's your impression? Do you think we truly reached him?" Troy stepped closer, arms crossed loosely. "Yes, sir. I felt a genuine change in Zeno before he left. Something shifted in his heart. He's still what he is, immensely powerful, childlike, but he felt kinder, more aware." She smiled a bit. "I think you gave him something new to consider, Captain, a perspective he lacked." Worf grunted thoughtfully. "Let us hope it is enough. That being's considerations, or lack thereof, could mean existence or oblivion for millions." It was his practical Klingon way of saying, if he learned, good, because the stakes are high. Riker crossed his arms and looked at Picard admiringly. "If anyone could teach a god to mind his manners, it's you, sir." There was a hint of a grin on the first officer's face, trying to lighten the mood. Picard chuckled softly at that, running a hand over his bald head, as if smoothing down stray thoughts. "I'm not sure I did all that. Number one, a great deal of credit goes to the boy himself. He had the capacity to learn. He just needed a nudge." He sighed, recalling Zeno's earnest eyes. "In the end, perhaps even the most omnipotent being can grow, much like we do, one lesson at a time." Silence. Then, as the crew each took a moment to breathe and return mentally to the here and now, the stars kept shining, indifferent to the extraordinary encounter that had just concluded on this small Federation ship. Finally, Picard straightened in his chair, a familiar resolve returning. There was still work to be done, reports to file, Starfleet to inform some version of the truth. Anyway, colonists to reassure. Life moved on. Mr. Data, status of the sector. All systems stable, Captain. No anomalies detected. The region is secure, Data replied promptly. Mr. Worf, stand down from yellow alert. Resume standard operation. operations. "Aye, sir," Worf responded, deactivating the alert status and reconfiguring shields back to normal cruising mode. His fingers hovered for a second over the weapons panel, and he quietly locked away the torpedoes that had been armed as a last resort. He hoped never to contemplate using them on a guest like that again. Picard tapped a control on his chair. "Bridge to all decks. The earlier emergency has been resolved. Stand down from emergency status. All crew, resume normal duty shifts." His calm, authoritative voice piped through the ship-wide intercom, earning relieved smiles and cheers in many quarters of the ship. He then looked around at the bridge officers, his trusted circle, who had just stared down infinity and came out the other side. "I'll begin writing the report for Starfleet Command. They may find parts of it hard to believe." He allowed himself a dry smile. "You could always invite them to come interview the witness." Riker joked lightly. "Oh wait," that earned a round of chuckles, much needed to dispel the lingering tension. As the bridge crew settled back to their stations, Picard took one more glance at the observation lounge doors. For an instant, he imagined he saw a small blue face peeking back with a grin, but it was just a figment of a vivid memory. He addressed the crew quietly. "In our line of work, we often encounter the extraordinary, but this day, this will be one for the logs." He paused. "I want to commend you all for your composure. It's not every day one meets a being who can alter reality on a whim, and still finds a friend among us." Troy smiled. Worf bowed his head respectfully. Data looked pleased in his understated way, and Dr. Crusher placed a hand over her heart, still touched by the empathy of the moment. Picard faced forward, eyes on the stars. In his mind echoed Zeno's parting words. "Little things can be important. One friend matters." A rare, gentle smile graced the captain's face as he gave the order to move on. "Engage." The Enterprise D surged ahead at warp, its mission continuing, a single starship among countless stars, carrying a crew of individuals whose lives, no matter how small in the cosmic scale, had touched the heart of an Omni-King. They sailed on, a renewed sense of wonder and humility accompanying them into the vast unknown, where new discoveries and perhaps new friendships awaited among the stars.